Let the word go
The
forth.
challenge, the opportunity to connect. The 1960s, a time of imagination and change, a time of anger and fear. The 1960s, a pioneering program called Challenge
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
that looked at our connections, our divisions, through the lens of shared values.
With something real.
60 years later, we examine our divisions, our connections, our shared pains and successes in a new program called Challenge 2.0.
The word hangry describes a real physical condition when hunger, low blood sugar, causes a release of hormones that make people angry. It's also been used to describe the emotional state in this country. Hunger for change and anger at its absence. In last week's episode of Challenge 2.0, we explored the rise of nihilism, the rising drive to destroy institutions, relationships, individuals. This week, we continue our conversation with Seattle area faith leaders over potential ways to replace that emotional hanger with the positive hunger to reconnect and to rebuild.
So we are so pleased to be able to continue our conversation, a difficult conversation about nihilism from last week's episode, again with Rabbi Olivier Ben Chaim from Bet Aleph Meditative Synagogue in Seattle and Reverend Dave Brown of the Presbyterian Church, emeritus, but I know better than that because you are so busy. You do Blues Vespers and various other activities that are really rich and filling. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you for your steadfast commitment to this forum and the good work that you do with it. It's a very positive thing.
Well, thank you very much. It also gets me out of the house, and my wife would say that's a good thing at times. Yeah. In the very first part of this conversation, what we aired last week, we talked about the rise of what's called nihilism. A sense of disaffection with anything, the urge to simply destroy or disassociate yourself, and to take personal advantage as the prime example of what matters. I wonder if you could just share your thoughts to sort of connect to that before we move forward as to how and why we find ourselves in this place. Dave, we started with Olivier last week. Maybe we can start with you this week.
I guess why we're facing more nihilism in our society. Some of it's philosophical. Back in the mid 1800s, when the people were talking about the death of God, and with the death of God, all things become lawful. And then as we've evolved, people moved into a humanistic stage. Well, we no longer have God dictating things to us, but as human beings, we are lifting up the beauty of humanity and celebrating humanity. Mm-hmm. And I think now people are reacting to that either by saying, well, no, there's no reason to celebrate humanity. It's all about me and all about my will to power. Mm-hmm. Or we're reacting to this humanism and creating more fundamentalist or strict religious identities. If there's more orthodoxy in Judaism, more conservative orthodoxy in Christianity, we're no longer allowing to have the open and inclusive religious traditions.
Mm-hmm. Olivier, what's your sense on that?
Again, it's like Pastor Dave said, it's a really broad question. I think there are so many directions that we could take this because it's a multidimensional answer that we need to look at, of course. Mm-hmm. It is happening for each individual, but I think it's also we talked about this last week. The from what I'm seeing is as a crisis of belonging. So it's happening in the we, capital W and capital E sphere of our culture. There's a cultural shift, breakdown maybe. I don't know how to qualify it. It is also happening in all of our system. Our political system is being challenged. There's a lack of trust in it. Our judicial system, there's a great lack of trust in it. Like all of those, the lack of trust is one of the core foundation of nihilism. When there is no trust, then like we mentioned last week, then let's just burn it down and try to recreate something we can all believe in and all trust in. So I think our institutions are also being very much fragilized, if that's a word, and distrusted, completely distrusted. The economy is extremely challenging. Maybe with the coming online of AI, for example, but not just. We'll see the devastating effect of the tariffs that have been plaguing our country just in the last 9 months. I think also that as the young generations are contemplating their future, the crisis in the climate. There is so much that is happening, especially for a 20-year-old, and my kids are of that age, and they look at what's ahead of them, and it really doesn't look appetizing. It doesn't look like a future that they relate to. And when you don't have a future, when the future disappears from in front of you, and you look at your elders and you look at the good life that they might have had, and you look at your own future, and there is nothing but a gaping hole of probably plagues of the climate crisis, plagues we could name. It would be like a Passover. We can name the 10 plagues that are coming ahead of us. And if you're a youngster fresh out of college or finishing college or in college, and you look at where is the next 30 years for me, I think that's also, we may be touching on the soft spot of why do people react the way they react. If you don't have a future, it's hard to believe in the present.
And I think, I want to be really careful with this response. Over my lifetime, we've seen immense changes when it comes to affirming diversity. The whole growth of the civil rights movement and recognizing what white Americans have done to people of color. The whole affirmation, and I say this as somebody who is an activist for LGBTQ equality and worked for gay marriage, so allowing that to come into the center stream now of our society and celebrate that. The affirmation of trans people, and again, I've done work on that. But it really, over the 40 years of my ministry, that has changed dramatically. And I think there's a group of people that wonder where they fit in this new world. The straight, white folks. Because we've changed so much and lifted up all of the great diversity and celebrated how really wonderful this diversity is, and allowing people the freedom to be who they are and freedom to do what they are, no matter what their race is, no matter what their gender identity is. But there are folks that have felt demonized because of who they are. I think we've seen politically people who feel disenfranchised. And maybe people who haven't been able to recognize that they need to step back in order to let other voices be heard and resent that and are angry about that. And so how can we now move in our evolution where we're fully diverse, and where those white young men that followed Charlie Kirk, because he heard them, can feel heard by some of the progressive and liberal institutions, where some of them feel like they're no longer heard. And I say that, and I have to be very, celebrating the diversity, knowing that white men have had too much of the pie and need to back off, but still believing there are white men who feel slapped in the face and angry about it. And I think that's a threat to our well-being as a society and how they react to it.
So when you talk to people, counseling people within your faith communities, outside of your faith communities, and they express this sense of hopelessness, I think of a quote from David Brooks, the New York Times columnist, that said he had an encounter with a young woman, and she said, for you, it was easy. You had something to believe in. We really don't have much of a sense of what we can believe in, either in terms of their faith, their community, or the future, as you both brought up. When you offer guidance to members of your community or outside of that, where do you begin?
I begin with them. I try to figure out where they're at in our lives, what's happening, where do they stand in this moment of our meeting together. And when they express those kinds of fears, as Jews, members of my community, I seek to open for them the sense of their belonging, where they belong, that richness of our tradition, and how far back we go, thousands of years, and in telling the story of our people, in telling the story of our lineage, that we are the people who have seen all the great empires come and go. From the Assyrian to the Greek Empire to the Roman, to the monarchies, to the czars, to the emperors and the dictators, and we're still here. And I think it's a way for me to open them to there's a continuum of time, and what has supported us to move through all of these very difficult times, as you know, Jewish history is not a straight, flowery path or road. It's come with a lot of darkness and a lot of violence, and yet, because we stay true to who we are, we stay true to what our values are, what we believe, what we stand for in the world. We continue to lead, a Jewish life, and I think in using those images and using this history, I said it's not just our people, but each individual as well. What are your values? What do you stand for? What is it that you bring to this world, to your family, to your community? These are the places you can ground yourself, anchor yourself, and let the world do whatever the world does. And things will come and go. Stay where you feel you belong, and act from that place in ways that are kind, loving, and expressing the values and the moral truths of your community, of your being, of yourself. Let the world will do whatever the world will do. Ultimately, we live our own unique life, and how can we live it as well as we can individually?
And building on that, and in my practice, in my work, I start with the person, and from my sense of my Christian spirituality, I remind the person that they're loved by something that's far greater than them, by this mystery we call God. And don't ever forget that. And find as many ways as I can to help them remember that. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean that the world is really going through some hard stuff right now, and the world around them is really scary. But you are loved. You are beautiful. You have purpose. I believe in you. And I think spiritual leaders need to spend time just blessing people with that reminder, because there's so many forces out there that want to erase that. I encourage people to have a spiritual practice that doesn't, there's a difference in my mind. It's not to escape our political and cultural realities, but to ground themselves in the midst of it. To remember, there's the poem by Mary Oliver, and to pay attention to those wild geese calling to you as they fly home. If you spend your day beginning by checking your newspaper or going online and reading newspapers, maybe you need not to do that. Maybe you need first to take a walk in the garden, or to take a walk and breathe and to see the creation, and then deal with the world. Again, it's really important when I invite people to spiritual practice and spiritual centering. I'm not saying this is how you escape the pain. I'm saying this is how you ground yourself as you engage a painful world.
So when you ground yourself, when you have that sense of belonging, reconnecting to that, we get the sense that cutting off those that we don't agree with isn't necessarily the answer. But how do you balance when you seek to listen to those that have a different worldview than you do? How do you balance listening to them trying to get a sense of where they're coming from without giving credence necessarily to what their worldview is. Any thoughts or suggestions on that?
Well, you have to start with the inner work. I had the privilege on several occasions to be with Sister Helen Prejin, who wrote Dead Man Walking. And her credo, which Olivia and I have talked about in other settings, is that every person is worth more than the worst thing that they've done. Mm-hmm. And the inner work is, before you reach out to that political opponent or the person you disagree with, you need to ground yourself and actually believe that this person as a human being has value and worth. Mm-hmm. Or else you're just going through the motions. You're just playing a game. I mean, if you think that somebody is less than human because you disagree with them, you have to deal with yourself first. Mm-hmm. And then I think you just have to find ways of talking and saying, I disagree with you, and making sure you're not empowering their voice in a way that's going to harm others.
You know, as I was listening to you share this beautiful answer, Pastor Dave, I'm reminded of this work we're doing as interfaith friends. Mm-hmm. One of the things that happens when you step into this world of the interfaith and meet people that are not from your own side of the yard, right? That have very different worldviews, different ways of relating to spirit, different ways of different cultures, different everything. Where do you start? Because, you know, as you first step into that circle, that interfaith circle, you may be thinking to yourself, all kinds of wrong ideas about the people you are about to encounter. And you may be thinking about all the ways that you dislike their perspective. Mm-hmm. You oppose their perspective. And any one of us, I believe, I don't want to speak for everybody, but any one of us who has been on this journey has realized, just like you said, that's why your answer is inspiring me, that in fact, in order to engage in an interfaith world, mm-hmm. in finding bridges and connection, you have to be really strong in your own self. Mm-hmm. You have to know your stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, as a rabbi, I have to really make sure that I know anything about and everything about Judaism, because these good people are going to, to bring a mirror to me and say, "What do you think, Rabbi?" Right? So I need to really be sure about who I am, sure about my faith, know my stuff, mm-hmm. right? And then from there, and a lot of people think, you do interfaith, and then that doesn't mean that all the faith kind of dissolve in the pot of. Right. Yeah. No, it's not. It's the opposite that happens. You become actually better as not a defender, because there's nothing to defend, but as an owner, if you want, mm-hmm. of your own side of the triangle, in our case, and then you can contribute. Now, to your point, there's also an acknowledgement that we have healthy boundaries in this mm-hmm. conversation, right? We can be tolerant, right? And to me, that's one of my, one of the things that I really stress for myself and for others. Mm-hmm. I can be extremely tolerant, and I believe that I am. I believe that I wouldn't be involved in this work if that wasn't the case. But I don't believe in tolerance so much that I can tolerate intolerance. Mm-hmm. So, and I think this is a big problem in our society. I think that we are coming to a place where we want to be so tolerant that suddenly we can be tolerant of intolerance. Right. And I think that's a bridge too far. And I think in the context of interfaith, we know where those boundaries are, and we know to respect those, and we know to push to the edge sometimes, but also to keep that sense of tolerance to the edge of intolerance. If we get to discussions that are becoming intolerant, I think that will be where we say, okay, let's stop. Because that is not a place that we can engage with. That is not a place that we can find common ground in this.
And to build on that, you start by exploring and really coming down to what you think the core teaching is in your tradition. Mm-hmm. The old blues song, before you accuse me, take a look at yourself. Before you engage in dialogue, take a look at yourself. And that is where it all starts. And when you reach out to those you disagree with or those that have other faith traditions, you start by knowing where you are. And when I would do interfaith programs, you start by this, as a Christian pastor, I believe this is the core teaching that I bring to our interfaith. Second, that clarity, I was engaged 10 or 15 years ago in some very painful conversations within my tradition, my denomination, as I advocated for LGBTQ inclusion and affirmation of gay marriage, both gay clergy and gay marriage. And there were a lot in my governing body that strongly disagreed with me. I tried to build those bridges you talked about, but I did so beginning, not by being nasty, but by looking the person in the eye and say, before we start, you need to know that I affirm gay rights in the church, and I believe your exclusion of those rights does harm and damage. I want to talk to you about that, but you should know where I stand on that I think there isn't two different ways that you're doing harm. Now, let's get to know each other. But I try to be right up front, clear. And for some, that makes people run away. But I just can't pretend that somebody who is denying my daughter or my best friend their right to celebrate their humanity, I can't pretend that that's nothing.
So when you are going to have those difficult conversations with somebody from a different worldview, a different orientation than you have on an issue or aspect of life, you might run the risk of, when you seek to make that conversation, that connection, that people that are part of your community are going to say, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing talking to them? We feel like you're abandoning us, or that you're being untrue to our own tradition. How do you navigate that sense with others in your circle, or avoid that sense?
I live in a community that that rarely, if ever, happens. Again, I live in a very progressive Jewish community, so there is a sense that, in fact, outreach and building bridges between different communities is aligned with our values, is aligned with our own moral truths. So I'm rarely faced with or confronted with something like that.
When I was serving congregations, I always focused on everybody's pastoral need as I could, and I tried, those who disagreed with me and those that agreed with me. So I didn't ignore those that disagreed with me, but I was also very clear when I went into ministry in all of the congregations I've served. This is who I am, and I think sometimes progressives get in trouble because they go back to their synagogue or their church, and they hide some of what they're about. And I think we just need that transparency.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take it on the personal level, there's a lot of people who disagree with me. I have taken some, stance based on my values and who I am and what I believe to be moral truth and truth in the world, that over the last couple of years, specifically through the war in Gaza, that have angered and displeased a lot of my members, and they've expressed their discontent with their feet and have left the community. And it's been really difficult. It's been really hard. And at the same time, like Pastor Dave says, this is who I am. I mean, it's in my biography. People who came to my community have always known my history and who I am and what I stand for. And everybody makes their choice, and I respect their choice. And then that's just the way things happen. I don't want to hold anybody, in my community, and I don't want to compromise who I am or my teaching in the name of political expediency. It's okay. Look, from my perspective, everybody is right from the place they live. Everybody is right. From the perspective they inhabit, everybody is right. So I can listen to them. I can understand their perspective. I want to understand their perspective, the world that they live in, or where they come from. And at the same time, like I said earlier, if I in my worldview, I feel that their perspective is intolerant, then I won't tolerate it, and I will stay true to who I am, and I will stay true to those values that I, as a rabbi, I seek to share with everyone.
And what's so
and that's everybody makes their decision, and it's okay.
And
I
what's
respect that.
so important about what you said is you start with I statements.
Absolutely.
These are my values. This is how, and when I got into that debate 15 years ago, time and time again, I didn't point my finger and condemned my colleague for their beliefs. I said, this is my belief on this issue, and I'm passionate about it. And I think going with our I statement with people we disagree with is a whole lot, can lead to a more productive and enlightening conversation than if we lead with a statement of condemnation saying, your belief on this is wrong.
This has been a masterclass, really, in terms of how to approach these situations and to stay true to yourself and grounded, and then expand that ground for others. So there's so much more we could do with this, and will do with this. So I'm going to invite you both to come back and do another conversation, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much.
It's always a pleasure, and I think our mission needs to be that more people know about the good work that this program is doing in our community. Thank you.
Well, thank you again. And thank you so much for joining us in this episode of Challenge 2.0. We hope you'll tune in again next week.